Welcome to the show and welcome to our Ask the Herbalist segment, or sticking with the theme, whispers from your herbalist, which is yours truly, me. So if you don't already know, I am an absolute herbs geek. It is my career, it is my passion, and I especially love it when I get to share it with my loved ones, which is you guys, my listeners. And of course, having an episode where I get to collaborate with you guys is always, I think, one of my favorite things to do. Although I say this a million times on the show and I have it in the show notes, this is your reminder that I am not giving you medical advice here. I'm always going to recommend that you see your respective practitioner, or if you want to work with me, you can find my information in the show notes. So this is just me answering your questions in a very general sort of way based off my knowledge, experience, and research. But you should never take medical advice from a podcast, from social media, etc. If I mention a brand or a formula or herb, it's most likely going to be in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. So instead of the usual show highlights, I'm going to list out your questions that I answer. Number 1, do you ever think about the soul of a plant? How do we connect, etc. with it? 2, which plants are high in phytoestrogen and should be avoided when estrogen dominant? Number 3, is it generally best to take herbs on an empty stomach, and should we drink it like tea or a shot? 4, are there herbs you should not have in the morning or at night? 5, where to source herbs from? Should we trust Amazon and Google recommendations? And what kind of quality checks should we search for? 6, what is the number 1 most versatile herb to have on hand? 7, herbs to help nicotine addiction and help with lung health after quitting. And 8, herbs for fertility and to help heal miscarriage. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. Sleepy house right now with sleeping cats everywhere. So if you hear the rain, hear the thunder, you're welcome for this summer thunderstorm ASMR. So topic is Ask the Herbalist. I am so excited. This was a really last minute idea, and thank you so much for everyone who asked your questions. I mean, obviously this podcast would not exist without you. And quite honestly, I go through a lot of phases with social media where it's like a game, right? It's like a game where you're like, is this, especially if you're a creator and you're trying to put out something that's a brain baby of yours, you think, is this going to be the post that people are going to give a shit about? And then you are like, this is so good. This is so amazing. And then it's either people don't care or the algorithm is doing whatever nonsense it does. And you're like, damn, I lost that game. Instagram won, me 0. So sometimes I feel a little bit like, hello, is there anybody out there? And you guys are there, and you guys showed up. Thank you. All right, let's get into the questions. Let's dive right in. Well, actually, if you didn't listen to the intro, I am a board-certified clinical herbalist with an emphasis on Chinese herbs, and that's my qualifier here. Okay. Oh, by the way, I am going to keep everybody anonymous on this episode. In the future, if I do another Ask the Herbalist segment and you want to be mentioned, I will ask you, but because of just the integrity and importance of anonymity when asking health-based questions in this field, I wanted to just make the assumption that everyone wants to remain anonymous. All right, so my first question is one of my favorites. And it's not as medically based as the other ones. This is kind of like our soft opening here. So the first question is, do you ever think about the soul of a plant? How do we connect, etc. with it? I think about it all the time. It is my Roman Empire. Do plants have souls? I live my life. I think that's a very subjective answer or question to answer here. I live my life based off of kind of more indigenous practices, which is everything has a consciousness. Everything vibrates at a frequency that emits a certain consciousness, whether that's the stone, whether that's the rain overhead, a tree, a plant, etc. That being said, I really tried to stay very... It's funny because I'm actually staring at my my cat tower here, my kitty condo for my cats, and I'm like, wait, does that mean I believe this has a consciousness? Gonna give that one a no, but I do, I know that this object in front of me emits its own unique vibration. I mean, that's how I can see it, is because of the cells vibrating in front of me. But that doesn't really equate to a soul, does it? Obviously, it's based off of scientific evidence or a lot of logic. But because plants have cells that are photoreceptive and they grow and they live and they die and they respond to the environment, yes, I think they have a consciousness, and I would argue they have a soul. And what we could do to connect with that plant is to simply sit with it. It's really that simple. How I would sit with a plant is I would get myself in silence. I mean, you could play some music, but the way that I suggest, because music has its own consciousness and it has its own whispers within it, and I think it can be distracting. So if you're going to play music, play something like binaural beats or sound frequencies or maybe shamanic drumming. Anything that's going to help you get into that zone, that theta wave state, which is known as a meditative state. And pour yourself a cup of tea and sit with that tea and hold it to your heart, smell it, take slow sips, maybe call in and say, like I call in, I'm drinking pu'er tea right now, so I didn't really have the intention of sitting with the consciousness of pu'er at the moment. I just needed a little kick of energy because I'm on that full moon sleep cycle, which is team no sleep. But what I would have done is, call in the energy of pu'er. Call in, I know it comes from China, so call in the ancestors of the Chinese lands. Like I know it comes from the mountains, the Yunnan mountains in China. So I want to tap in. So I also suggest that you do a little bit of research on an herb that you want to connect with. And really, that's it. It doesn't have to be that complicated. How you know that you're getting, I mean, you could do some breath work. What really helps, again, is if you're in a zone. If you just walked in through the door and from a long day at work and you sit down and go straight into it, chances are your consciousness is going to get in the way. You're going to think about your day, you think about what comes next. So it's really good to consciously, I sometimes even say, I step aside so that you can shine through with really any spiritual work that I do. I also suggest, depending on how sensitive you are, of doing a higher dose with it. For example, I've been developing in a relationship with He Huan Pi, also known as mimosa tree bark. And when I have it in my formula, I kind of just do a general dosage. But when it's just me and He Huan Pi, rather than adding like 5 grams to 100 grams, which I would use over the course of a week or two, I would do, and again, that's mixed, like 5 grams over 2 weeks. I would do probably 5 to 10 grams right there in that setting. Same with cacao. If I'm drinking cacao because right now that's my preferred way of energy, or say I'm on day 1 of my menstrual cycle. I just started my bleed and I just don't really have much of an appetite, but I do want something that's nourishing. I'll probably have somewhere between 0.5 to 0.7 grams of ounces rather of cacao. But if I am intentionally wanting to do a ceremony of connecting with the consciousness of cacao, I'll do 1 to, I've never hit 2 ounces just because I'm a sensitive, I see myself as a sensitive girl. And so I don't need a lot to connect, but I would do between 1 to 2 ounces of cacao. I don't measure in grams for whatever reason. I do ounces, but that would be one of my ways of suggesting. Another thing that you could do is, for example, I have some iboga with me. Iboga is a plant medicine from Central Africa, and I place it on my altar. It can be a very strong psychedelic if you take the appropriate dosage, which I don't do. I've only had 1 strong ceremony with it. But over the past year, I've been developing a really strong relationship with its consciousness, because its consciousness would visit me in dreams. And that's another way that you can connect to herbs, especially if you're someone like me and you research a lot on herbs. They're going to show up in your dreams and they're going to talk to you. Actually, a really fun dream that I recently had with iboga was, because I'd never looked it up. Before my ceremony, it was more that it kind of started the opposite way. It started in my dreams. And then when I would try to research it, I would start to feel really woozy. And I was like, oh, what's happening? And like really sweaty palms. And I'd be like, nope, don't want to get into this mode right now. And then I purposely didn't do research, which is what I would normally do before a ceremony. And so I never even looked up what iboga looks like as a plant. And recently I had a dream about, I was in Africa and I was looking for my husband Mana, and I was with a friend, Will, and these people were like, yeah, we saw this massive guy. He was the biggest guy we'd ever seen with tattoos. And I was like, that might be my husband. Which way did he go? And they were like, down that path. And I'm walking down the path and Will goes, Steph, look at all these iboga trees. And I'm like, iboga's a tree? He's like, yes, pretty sure it is. And then it was these beautiful trees with these beautiful, bright, orangey, reddish yellow flowers and these big hanging fruits. And then I woke up and I was thinking, I've really never even looked up what iboga looks like. And so I looked it up and it looked exactly like my dream. So I think 110% yes, that was the soul of iboga saying something to me. It's sending me a message. Sometimes all I need to do is just hold the jar and meditate, and the consciousness just seeps through my energy field, and I feel the presence and the soul of it with me. So that's another way that you can connect with a plant, is creating a little altar for it and just simply sitting with it. Another great way that you could do it, if you're more of the artsy type, is draw the plant. Also, you can look up different ways to, maybe like, say if it's rose, you can learn ways to create a red pigment from rose and paint a watercolor painting with that red pigment. So there's a lot of ways. And how again, I don't think I actually touched on this, but how you know the consciousness is seeping through is your mind is blank and you start to hear random thoughts come in. Maybe it's images, maybe it's words, maybe it's just a sensation in your body, whether you're clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. It will manifest in different ways. Take some time to slow down, to really enjoy, let it be tantric. And I don't mean that in a sensual term. I mean that in a sensational term. Like, tap into the sensations that are coming in. So it does require a lot of self-awareness and knowing what your field looks like so that you can separate from it. So that could even be a great place to begin too. Okay, thank you so much for that question. You are speaking to my soul. All right, let's get into the next question. So this is one that definitely has been something that's been on my mind a lot, and it challenged me to do even more research than I've done before. So the question is, herbs that are high in phytoestrogens and should be avoided when estrogen dominant. So before I do really dive into this research that I've done over, thanks to this question, but also over just my time, because I'm somebody who, I'm not the classical estrogen dominant, but I'll get into that in a moment, but who struggles with painful periods and blood clotting and all that fun PMS stuff too. Estrogen dominance is something that's really been on my mind lately. And while, again, I have this experience, I have this background in herbalism, and I've done this research, I am by no means an expert on the subject matter. And in fact, the research kind of presented a little bit more questions from me. But I'm going to get into it. So what is estrogen dominance? Straight up definition is it's a theory about a metabolic state where the level of estrogen outweighs the level of progesterone in the body. So there's two types of estrogen dominance. There's frank estrogen dominance, which is straight up the body produces too much estrogen. And then there's relative estrogen dominance, which is when the body doesn't produce sufficient progesterone and estrogen levels are higher in comparison. So if this is all kind of new to you, you're not fully aware, estrogen and progesterone are called steroid hormones that play a pivotal role in the regulation of mammal reproduction. So men and women have progesterone and estrogen in their body, but it's typically what they have a more of a reputation for is being a part of the female menstrual cycle. There are definitely other hormones that come into play here, but again, let's just keep it simple. Estrogen, progesterone. There are 3 types of estrogen, and it would take me a long time to get into what each of them do and all the roles that estrogen does, but the key role is enabling the functionality of sex organs. On the other hand, progesterone's main function is preparing the lining of the uterus for fertilization, implantation, and maintaining a healthy pregnancy. In the show notes, I've included a blog post that's good dives into estrogen and progesterone, and it has a great chart of how these hormones fluctuate throughout a menstrual cycle. But for the sake of time, I'm going to leave that blog there for you, and I'm going to just assume that you might have an idea. But if you don't and you don't want to look at the blog, just know that there is this give and take relationship. For the most part, at the parts of our cycle where estrogen is high, then progesterone will be low, and then when progesterone starts to really pick up, estrogen drops. Typically, when somebody's estrogen dominant, there's going to be a lot of issues and there's going to be a lack of progesterone. And progesterone helps with metabolism and a lot of other things. But again, we're going to focus on estrogen. So symptoms of estrogen dominance are fatigue, sleep disorders, brain fog, hot flashes, night sweats, hair loss, anxiety, weight gain, PMS symptoms such as irritability, breast tenderness, swelling, premenstrual pain, acne, constipation, bloating, headaches. My esthetician, she told me that having pimples around the jawline and the neck are typically signs of phytoestrogens, which are chemicals that mimic estrogen. And we'll get into that in a moment. But other symptoms would be water retention, loss of libido, mood change, irregular menstrual periods, heavy and painful periods, including blood clotting, cramps, infertility, and endometriosis. Let's talk real quick about symptoms in men because I want to be inclusive here. We've got fatigue, sleep disorders, hot flashes and night sweats, body hair loss, weight gain with loss of muscle mass, anxiety, mood changes, water retention, erectile dysfunction, and gynecomastia, which is also known as man boobies, man titties. So again, phytoestrogens are plant compounds which have a similar structure to estrogen, which over time, especially in this society that we live in, where there's actually a lot of chemicals that have endocrine disruptors that mimic estrogen as well, it can cause a lot of confusion in the body and cause symptoms such as estrogen dominance. So many of us have estrogen dominance in modern society. Again, this isn't me trying to diagnose you. Of course, if you are feeling like you might be this person, please go see a doctor. Please get some blood work. Please go find that clarity for yourself. Do never, ever, ever, ever use a podcast or social media as a means of diagnosis. But this is why so many of us wellness girlies are being really turned on to the importance of the products we buy. You can laugh all you want, call us crunchy, but we're trying to, as much as we can, protecting our hormonal pathways in our endocrine system here. I mean, for the past 3 years now, I've been making my own cleaner. But because this is an Ask the Herbalist segment, we're not going to get into cleaning products here. I do want to say, before I get into the herbs that have phytoestrogens in them, I want to say that this is why hormonal birth control can cause so many issues, because it works by using substances that mimic estrogen and progesterone to prevent ovulation. So this means that it can over time create a progesterone deficiency, which, as I mentioned before, is a form of estrogen dominance. And that's actually what I'm experiencing myself here. I was on birth control for 11 years. And then I stopped in 2020 and I never had painful periods beforehand. I never had any issues. I just got on birth control because I thought as a kid, like, if you want to have sex and you want to have good skin, then you needed to be on birth control. And so it was like a bee in my bonnet. I was like pushing my mom to get me onto birth control. And it was a huge mistake, but none of us knew any better. All of my gynecologists, really, really encouraged it. Let's move on to herbs that can cause, or that have phytoestrogens in it, and that can cause estrogen dominance here. So I did a lot of research on PubMed, and I found a study by Zava, Dollbaum, and Blen about estrogen and progesterone bioactivity of foods, herbs, and spices. I have the study citation in the show notes here if you want to check that out. But these were the herbs listed within the study to have significant levels of phytoestrogens. We've got red clover, black cohosh, or shengma, if you're for my TCM people, hops. Hops is in beer, and that's why, I don't know if you guys have heard this. I know that on a podcast episode with my husband, we talked about how beer can cause men to have man titties. It literally lowers their testosterone levels because it raises estrogen levels. We also have dong quai or dong gui, which is a really popular herb for doing a combination of nourishing and moving blood in Chinese medicine. We have licorice or gansao, one of my favorite harmonizers. It's in almost every TCM formula. We also have chasteberry, also known as manjingzi in Chinese medicine. We have fo tea, which is also known as yejiao tung, the Asian form of ginseng or renshen, as well as the North American ginseng, which is xiangshen. They're both used mostly for different things. Renshen is more of, I would say, like a qi vitalizer, where xiangshen is more of a yin nourisher. Actually, something that I did recently learn, which I'm super bummed about, that's going to be on this list, is lavender. lavender has a ton of phytoestrogens, and it, again, like I was using lavender oil with jojoba quite often, and I was breaking out a lot on my throat, on my neck, and I recently discovered it's because I'm using lavender to slathering it all over my body. So that's a bummer, because I love the smell of lavender. It's just one of those herbs I really, really resonate with. But I think what the message here that we'll get to in a moment is, I think that we should be able to use all of these as long as we're seeking a balance here. And something to mention at the very end of the study that I pulled out, it says, since phytoestrogens have similar structures to endogenous estrogen, there have been a significant fear in the medical community that they may hamper recovery or cause a relapse in estrogen receptor positive breast cancer patients. That is also kind of an extreme form of having way too much estrogen in the body, is breast cancer. They also say at the end that doctors frequently recommend that their cancer patients avoid herbs which contain phytoestrogens. However, the evidence is inconclusive. The 6 highest estrogen or estradiol, which is one of those 3 forms of estrogen. Estradiol is specifically related to a woman's reproduction and menstrual cycle. Binding herbs that are commonly consumed are soy, licorice, red clover, thyme, turmeric, hops, and verbena. All right, so I found another study. I don't know if I'm going to say this one right. Orator Klein, Janfaza, Wong, and Chang, which is called Estrogen Binding Activity, Bioactivity in Foti, which is, again, also, or actually, I don't know if I mentioned Foti. Yeah, I did. It's Yejiao Tong in Chinese medicine, and other herbs used for their estrogen-like effects as determined by a recombinant cell bioassay. So in this study, they studied in vitro estrogen bioactivity in red clover, dongui or dongquai, black cohosh, soy, licorice, chaste tree berry, foti, and hops. Soy, clover, licorice, and hops have a larger amount of measurable estrogen bioactivity as suspected. And they also discovered that high estrogen activity extracts were in Yejiao Tong, also known as foti, which was not previously reported. So they're kind of surprised by that result. Chasteberry, also known as manjingsa or vitex fruit, black cohosh, and dongquai, dangui, did not have measurable activity with this method. The last thing that was mentioned in this study was that red clover, soybean, and black cohosh were frequently used as alternative compounds for hormone replacement therapy to treat menopausal disorders. So the fact that these are seen as, because sometimes some people have low amounts of estrogen and that can cause issues as well. So because they have effectiveness in treating menopausal disorders, red clover, soybean, and black cohosh, then I would say that would be a high phytoestrogen, a very effective phytoestrogen here. The last thing I'm going to say on this topic is somebody sent me an Instagram called Estrogen Free. I'll include it in the show notes. And she's all about estrogen free living, and she's got a lot of books on it. She would be, I guess you could say, an expert. In the show notes, I have included a list that she has down of, I'll include her website as well, but I wrote down some of the other herbs that she mentions that are high in phytoestrogens. But just to name a few, we've got ashwagandha, we've got xiangfu, cypress, nutgrass, and rhizome, which I've been using a lot. But it's what's confusing for me is xiangfu is known to help with menstrual pain due to qi stagnation. Qi stagnation and blood stagnation do have their differences here, but often where blood is stagnated, qi is also not flowing. I also get a lot of rib cage pain, and it is specifically indicated for that. And when I was on my period and I was experiencing pain, it was really great to help with my headaches and rib cage pain. So that's where I'm getting a little bit of confusion here. Maybe it's something that it helps treat the branch rather than the root. It helps treat the symptom rather than the actual issues with my period here. And by the way, I've never gotten blood work on it. I've been told that I most likely have it by my OBG, but she never reported blood work. So maybe I shouldn't even be saying that. And she probably shouldn't have even said it either. But the last two herbs I want to mention, because it seems like all the herb girlies here love, are turmeric and dandelion. I was very surprised at that too. So what do I want to say about this? I think that an awareness of phytoestrogens, if you're somebody who's experiencing a lot of these symptoms, especially related to your menstrual cycle, is definitely warranted. I don't think freaking yourself out over this is the best route to do either. And so I'm going to keep this list on me and do a lot more research, take a lot more consideration on the herbs that I'm including in my formulas. I'm going to try to maybe tilt the scale away from all these phytoestrogen dominant or carrying herbs and start to work from there. Again, I don't think it's worth being afraid of anything and everything, but use your education, use your knowledge, use the wisdom to maybe reduce and find better balance in your consumption of these herbs. A product that I've heard is really great to find out whether you're ovulating and figure out all your hormonal levels for your cycle is called Inito. I've never used it, but I've heard amazing things from it. Again, don't take all my advice. Contact an herbalist, contact an integrative medicine doctor, contact an OB, do whatever it takes if this is something that you're starting to feel passionate about and want to look more into. All right, so next question is it generally best to take herbs on an empty stomach, and should we drink it like tea or like a shot? So for the first part of that question, it depends whether you should have it on an empty stomach. It depends on what your current pattern is, and it also depends on what kind of herb and formula you're taking for what reason. I would say rule of thumb, it's good to have a little bit of something in your stomach. But say you're using a formula like Ganmai Datsao Tong, also known as licorice and jujube combination. It's literally licorice with xiaomai, which is also wheat, and datsao, which are jujubes or red dates. So that would be something, it's literally food. It's literally just an herbal formula that's food. And that would be something that would be great to take on an empty stomach. We also have formulas in Chinese medicine such as Sijun Sitong, which is also known as the Four Gentlemen. And I know this is all opinion. It's all literally Chinese to you. So I will include these names in the show notes just so you can do your own research. But Sijun Sitong is a really great formula to improve digestion. So if you're taking a formula that is supposed to improve your digestion, and if your herbalist is going to tell you, they're going to say, hey, so I'm giving you this formula here to help improve your digestive system. You're going to want to take it before you eat. I would say between an hour to 30 minutes. So, honestly, sometimes I forget and I have it right before I eat. I'll sip on it and then I'll eat my food. And there's no harm there in that, I think. We have these rules of thumbs, but life be lifing. And I think that it's meant to be because it already is. That is my religion. That is my golden rule here. It's helped me get through so much in life. But yeah, you're going to have learning experiences that if you have this right before your meal, then especially say if you're somebody who loves to measure things like measuring your blood sugar levels, and you take Organic Olivia's product, glucobitters, you take right before eating and you measure your blood sugar levels and you realize, and you take it right before, and you realize it doesn't really have as positive of an effect if you have it 30 minutes before eating. That's something to put into your journal. But, we're not all like that. We're not all people who like to measure and record things. So play off based how you feel. It depends on the level, the system that we're working with. Again, if we're working with digestion to nourish and help with a deficient digestive system, have it before. I would even argue there's a formula called Biol, which is also known as the festival pill. And it's amazing for having, if you're about to indulge and you're having a lot of greasy, sugary foods or with alcohol. It's just amazing for that. So sometimes I actually will take it first thing in the morning after indulging. But if I can remember, I would actually prefer to take it before going out or getting home the night of. And that's been a process of figuring it out. So basically what I'm saying is, experiment. But say if you're taking a formula or an herb to help with your immune system, that could actually be something a little bit more testing on the gut. So you definitely want to have food in your belly. If you're a woman and you're taking an herb that has caffeine in it, whether that's pu'er, black tea, green tea, coffee, matcha, have something in your stomach, please. There's a lot I could get into about that, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave that there. That's going to be my cryptic piece of my cryptic request here from you. And then the next part of that question is if it's better to sip it or take a shot. I think it's so much better to sip it. Because in herbal medicine, especially with Chinese herbs, compliance is an issue. Not everybody is willing to taste the herbs or can remember. We often prescribe something called patents, which are herbs that are cooked down into a tea and then dehydrated and popped out in 1 gram per pill. And if you've worked with me, I've definitely prescribed that. I prescribe that a lot more because it's a lot easier versus doing a granular formula. There's just more to it. It's more expensive as well. But I believe that, I know that the way the herbs interact with your body, it interacts with your field. Let's take it back to the first question. It interacts with your field before it goes into your body. And within just the very smell or the image or the action of creating it, you're priming your body to receive that herb. Think of Pavlov's dogs. When they were thinking about their food or it was a certain time of day, they started to salivate. So when you're smelling your herbs, if they're for digestion, you're going to start to experience that salivation experience. You're going to your cells are starting to turn on. And our cells are so much more aware than we give them credit for. So I believe that the whole process of doing the herbal formula as well as taste is really, really important. For example, bitter flavor is something a lot of people avoid, but it is so freaking medicinal. It helps lower your blood sugar. It helps your body understand that, for example, how I know this is because our ancestors, the way that they found bitter herbs. So bitter herbs are known for heat clearing, antimicrobial, anti-inflammation, anti-infection. And the way they learned that these bitter herbs were so good for it is because of the taste. I was taking a neurophysiology course back in my undergrad, and he's talked about how taste is one of the most important senses that we have because it helped our ancestors figure out what was for us and what was not for us, But I mean, obviously, some people died, but taste was that first thing. And, I've even noticed that in certain phases of my life where maybe I had high inflammation or I remember I had an ear infection and I literally craved more bitter foods. And when I took my tea, it was the most disgusting, bitterest thing I've ever tasted. But there was a part of me that felt satisfied by the flavor. Maybe it was the placebo nocebo effect of me knowing at that point, having the knowledge that bitter was going to help. Yeah, it was going to help with my infection. But there's really something there in that. So if I'm taking tea pills, what I do is I suck on the tea pills, or I throw them in some hot water, and then I will let them sit for a little bit. Because again, like for me, I just know that they're so much more effective when taste is involved. All of that being said, of course, look, if you're somebody who struggles to just stomach it, and you're getting used to, you're somebody who is used to having highly palatable foods, whether that's just like a high carb diet or a lot of packaged foods, it's going to be tough at first. And use your resources. If this is available for you, use it. But as you get more into your journey with herbs, like for example, what I really wanted today was a matcha latte with my Chobani creamer, but I knew that I was having a high fat meal. I was having chicken thighs with the skin on, bone in, yum. And I knew that if I had my matcha with that high sugar content, that it really wasn't going to do me well. And in fact, I was going to benefit by having pu'er tea, which is quite bitter, and it's known to lower cholesterol and help with the digestion of fats, and so on and so forth. So there's something really to be said about the medicine of taste and flavor. And I think that drinking it like a tea is going to be way more beneficial, because again, like you're going to have that moment of really sitting with it, really opening your mind to what these herbs have to offer. But if it's going to be like Longdang Xiegantang, which is a really popular formula for STDs, ear infection, it's going to taste like shit. And so like there's no reward for he who suffered most. So if you got to shoot it, do what you got to do. Next question is there herbs you should not have in the morning or night? Short answer, not really. I think it's so much more important that you're using an herb according to your present symptoms versus the time of day. For example, I've had chamomile nervous system support tea first thing in the morning because I woke up feeling way too wired. I would say again, as I said with caffeine, especially for women, I as a general rule of thumb, what I like to do for my life is within that first hour or two of being awake, I don't have anything but water, because I know that my natural hormone cycles, that first hour or two is so pivotal for our natural hormone cycles. And so when you're introducing things, it's just going to cause, maybe it's going to cause dependency. I'm somebody who my whole life, I've been really wary of being dependent on something. So maybe it's going to cause your hormones to be dependent, to fire off on that one thing, but also it could also just cause a disruption to the whole system. So I'd never recommend caffeine within the very least within the first half hour to an hour of your day, especially on an empty stomach. But also, rule of thumb as well, what I've learned is in the evening, try to stick more with cooling herbs. Usually warming, yang-natured herbs are going to cause a rise in temperature, which can wake us up and cause insomnia. It's also going to cause a rise in energy up to the head. So, it can cause this combination of waking up overheated, your body feels like it's got to like move and groove and like it feels tense, or waking up and your mind's racing. That's usually too much heat or yang energy in the body, but also deficiency of yin. So for example, chai tea, personally, as an herbalist, I would not recommend somebody having chai tea right before bed, because it's going to have cinnamon, which is warming. It's going to have nutmeg, which is warming and drying. And so it's going to dry out the yin. I think maybe two other examples I would give on warming herbs that I wouldn't have in the evening, or what I recommend, would be ginger and turmeric. And so you want to, like, for the most part, try to either avoid or balance it out. For example, say if you have been prescribed a warming formula, and, ask your herbalist too, like, is this a balanced warming formula or is this straight up warm? And they're going to look at you and be like, how do you know this? But you can add aloe juice right before bed. Aloe juice is really great for insomnia, and it's very cooling. And so on and so forth. I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. Anyone who listens to this podcast or works with me is going to be told again and again on repeat that it's really all about balance. But I hope that I was able to answer your question here. All right, next question. Hello. Hi. I'm curious about where to source herbs from. Do you trust Amazon/Google recommendations? And what type of quality checks should you look for? Great question. I do, for the most part, trust Amazon when it comes to herbs. Usually what my rule of thumb is for quality checks is to make sure that they check for heavy metals as well as microbes. Double bonus points if they do screening for mold, and also organic. Sometimes there's a lot of formulas that I love that are super cheap that are not typically organic. And, quite honestly, I've been a student for many years. I haven't had a very stable job throughout those years. And so I've been balling on a budget. But now that I'm starting to work in my field and, have better savings, I'm going to so much more be really picky about the herbal formulas that I buy and really try to stick with the organic here. Also, it's going to depend on the kind of herbs. Like, for example, matcha it's one of those herbs that, and again, like this is where it goes back to getting to know the herb that you're gravitating towards, just doing a little bit of research here. Matcha is one of those herbs that cleans the soil as it grows, which is really cool. It's really awesome. And I think it also mimics what it does for the body. It can also clean the body as it's activated within. But if it's grown in soil that is not clean, not organic, and not tested for heavy metals and all that, stuff, it will unfortunately absorb those toxins and you will be drinking that in your tea. So especially with matcha, I try to be more purist about it and just spend the money if I'm going to have matcha at home. And, sometimes though, like I'm on the road and I'm freaking tired and I'm like, I need a hit and I don't do well with coffee. But say if, I'm having a long road trip and I need some caffeine, I'm going to go to Starbucks and have their shit matcha. I'm going to just like take one for the team, I guess, here. A couple of brands that I highly recommend would be Organic Olivia. She has a really, really high quality. I trust her a lot. Also, there's the brand Classical Pearls, which does Chinese herbal formulas, very unique formulas. And they're very high quality, but unfortunately you need to order that through a practitioner because you have to have a license to be able to make an account with them. In terms of Chinese medicine companies for formulas, I like Golden Flower Chinese herbs. They test for pesticide residues, microbial activity, and heavy metals. They're mostly organic, but it's honestly, it's a little bit of a challenge to find affordable companies. It's not that much of a challenge, but I recommend if you ever work with me and I give a recommended formula, I often recommend Guansitong, which they do a level of screening, but I don't think they're organic. Google formula, your formula, and organic Chinese herbs. But also in terms of just like regular everyday herbs, I'll always choose the organic option at the grocery store, or I probably won't get it and I'll look online and try to get something that's ideally locally sourced, small business owned, organic. But again, that's like if I'm feeling like I'm really excited to get this herb and I have the funds to do so. Last two companies I'll mention that you don't need to have an account for is Food Over Drugs. Again, this will be in the show notes, as well as Mountain Rose Herbs. They have a lot of herbs and they do mostly organic as well. The last part of this question I do want to quickly address is, do I trust Google? Kind of, not really, mostly no. I think that we're in an age of information and it's great to use our resources, but there is so much misinformation and so much we don't know when it comes to diagnosing unless you've been through the formal education of it or just done, read a book or done research. I don't trust TikTok. I don't trust Instagram when it comes to herbal recommendations. I'm kind of guilty. I'm not guilty here. I do post about herbs, but in my caption, I'll always remind people, do not self-diagnose. For example, why I don't really trust things like TikTok is I saw my friend sent me this post about hawthorn berry for weight loss and asking me, do you recommend this? And no, because the question is why are you struggling to lose weight? Are you somebody that's actually having a micronutrient deficiency and your body's struggling to absorb essential nutrients and so it's packing on layers of fat as a means of protection? Or are you somebody who's having trouble with digesting lipids, or maybe you're overeating certain things? There are so many nuances to weight loss. And this is why working with an herbalist, a practitioner, is so important, because you're not specially trained to know your pattern. And I'm not saying this to disempower you. There are ways that you can learn how to look at your own pattern. And I'm always about empowering my own clients and educating them if they're open to that. But don't just buy an herb because there's a TikTok trend on people drinking it to help with whatever it may be. That can actually be really dangerous and further contribute to a disbalance in your body. So always have a layer of skepticism, do your own research, and be willing to reach out to somebody who can support you. Next question is, what is the number one most versatile herb to have on hand? Love this question. Also kind of a challenge. I had to think about this one a lot. And okay, I'm going to do number one and then number 1.5. So I would say that the number one most versatile herb that I know of is peppermint / menthol / mint, or boha in Chinese medicine. It is so versatile because, you got a headache, have some peppermint tea. You got a tummy ache, have some peppermint tea. If you have insomnia, have some peppermint tea. Throat hurts, have some peppermint tea. It's also great for red eyes, superficial obstruction in the eyes, loss of voice, mouth and teeth problems, and skin ailments. So, you got itchy skin, take a bath in some peppermint tea. So why I think that it's one of the most versatile and effective herbs is because it has this action of expelling quote unquote turbid filth. In Chinese medicine, we call it unclean qi or turbid qi. And we, especially in our society, are exposed to that shit all the time, whether that's from fumes from a car, whether that's from our food, from our water. We're exposed to turbid filth all the damn time. And unfortunately, a lot of us, our detox pathways are overloaded and inundated with it. And so it can, cause things like epigastric disorders, diarrhea, dampness in the body, which can manifest as feeling heavy, low, like you have a sweatband of pressure around your head, having poor memory, and peppermint can help with all of that. Another really versatile herb, I wanted to give a yin herb, which is peppermint, a cool natured herb. And then I also wanted to give an herb that's warmer in nature, which is ginger. Ginger is also amazing for tummy aches. It's great for food poisoning. It's great for warming the body and warming the channels. It's great for warming the womb. It's great if you're about to catch a cold. And to give a quick explanation of why it has this action of being so effective is because it normalizes the flow of qi at the center of your body, and invigorates the circulation of qi, fluids, phlegm, and blood, which is just all the body fluids out together. And because, when we eat something, the first place where it's processed, where that begins, is at the center of the body. And so ginger is really helpful for that. I know that there's so many, in terms of Western, there's so many great benefits of ginger as well, but I feel like we all know them for the most part. If not, maybe research them for the sake of time. I'm going to leave it at that. Next question is, what are some good herbs to help nicotine addiction and help with lung health after quitting? I thought this was a very fascinating question, and it brought me down to a rabbit hole. So I want to say that I have done a dive into nicotine and how the alkaloid interacts with the limbic pathways in the brain in my Whispers of Hape episode, because that is a tobacco product that has nicotine in it. But that being said, the nicotine that's in Hape is very different from the nicotine that's present in cigarettes and vape pens. But I think starting there by understanding the nature of the addiction, how this unique chemical interacts in your brain, is a really, really great place to start if you haven't already done that. Nicotine is one of those things, or rather tobacco, is where you're dealing with two types of addiction here, like this habitual addiction, this oral fixation sort of thing going on, if we want to get Freudian on each other here, of bringing something to your lips, to your mouth, inhaling, exhaling. It is very soothing. It's a bit of a primal thing. I think it goes across time and history throughout mankind, which is fascinating to me. But then again, of course, there's also this chemical addiction here. While I can't relate to the chemical addiction to nicotine, I can relate to the habitual addiction because I realized this year that I was addicted to weed. And I also have been many times in a state of trying to recover my lungs from chronic marijuana usage and just bring my body back into balance. For anyone who is hearing this mention about weed and is wondering how I finally kicked that addiction, it was actually through an iboga ceremony, but that's another story for another day. In the past, when I've tried to quit smoking weed and I wanted to help my lungs recover, I used a formula called Biol Gujing Tong, which is also known as lily bulb decoction to preserve metal. So the metal element in Chinese medicine is the element for the lungs. The main herb in this formula is Biol, which is lily bulb. Lily bulb is known for moistening and nourishing the lungs and clearing heat. And what does smoking weed or smoking anything do? It dries out the lung and it creates heat in the body. Again, I'm going to put this formula in the show notes. I think it's generally a safe formula to use. That being said, say you're somebody who has been diagnosed with a lung abscess. Maybe you're coughing up blood, like something's a little bit more serious, or somebody with a diagnosis of COPD. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this formula to you. This is why working with an herbalist is so important, because we are trained to look at every sign and symptom. We look at your tongue, we listen to your pulse, which has a lot of nuances to it. We look at your diet to figure out what is the best formula for you for this. And also, just touching on single herbs, I know that mullein is really popular when it comes to lung health, but I've seen people do this. I've also seen it on social media of people adding mullein to their joints to help reduce the effects that the other products would have on the lungs. I actually had somebody ask me once if there were any herbs I recommended for lung health to be thrown into a joint. And I was just like, don't smoke a joint for lung health, please. But I mean, mullein is an expectorant. So actually, if you were smoking it in a joint, you would cough even more. And, you know, maybe you're smoking that joint because you want to cough up some phlegm. I'm not sure. And so we think that it's good for our lungs, but it's good for our lungs due to what pattern? So because of that, I'm not really going to get too much into, off the top of my head, single herbs. Instead, I want to talk about some research papers that I found on herbs that could be very beneficial in helping you with the recovery and the addiction. Okay, so the first article I found was by Yi, Li, Bai, Hum, and Li, and Shim. So I guess Yi et al. And it's the name of the research article was, I'm going to butcher this, but Paecilomyces japonica or japonica. Sorry, in Spanish, J is silent. Let's try that again. Paecilomyces japonica, which is a fungi, reduces repeated nicotine-induced neuronal and behavioral activation in rats. So what this study did is it worked with rats which were given every 30 minutes repeated injections of nicotine twice a day for 7 days. They measured the locomotor activity in these rats during these 7-day treatments. And then on the 7th day, they measured the expression of two things called CFOS and tyrosine hydroxylase, or TH, in the dopaminergic pathways. Basically, when somebody has a nicotine addiction, these two things, CFOS and TH, are going to be present in the brain. So what the results were was pre-treatment with the Paecilomyces japonica, or PJ for short, decreased the development of nicotine-induced sensitization. So CFOS and TH expressions were less in the brain, which means there was less of an addiction. So they did it for pre-treatment, and then they also used it for treating nicotine addiction, and they found that it was very effective in reducing these two alkaloids in the brain as well. What was really fascinating for me too was PJ, this fungi, which I have yet to look up to see where it's available. It is also used in Eastern Asia to help with opioid addiction. Very, very interesting there. Okay, I also found a really great article, which was, so is nicotine-free herbal composition for smoking de-addiction. And why I loved it so much, because it was a placebo-controlled, double-blind, randomized, multi-centric clinical study. Double-blind study is gold standard for research papers. I also skimmed all the way to the bottom and saw that there was no conflict of interest, because it does talk about a product called Smoktect. Again, I'm just going to write the name for it in the show notes, and you can do your own research. Again, there's no affiliation. I am not recommending this. This is just based off the research paper. But it was funded by a company called Project Happiness. So it was not funded by Smoktect, this double-blind randomized clinical study. But they use this product to help to see if they can reduce the addiction to nicotine. So what they did in the study is participants had, with a history of smoking a minimum of 5 cigarettes daily for at least 3 years, showing a high level of carbon monoxide levels in the lungs. So the average age was male, female between 18 to 70 years old. Again, 5 cigarettes daily for the past 3 years. So what they did is they had the participants take Smoktect, I'm not saying it right, you're going to have to check the show notes, or placebo tablets in a dose of 2 tablets twice daily for 90 days. So there was a total of 103 participants, 52 in the trial, 51 in placebo, who completed the study. The evaluation of cessation of smoking was done along with other parameters like measurement of lung capacity, clinical assessment. They also looked at overall discomfort and quality of life. And so the results were that there was a significant reduction in smoking, as well as things like alveolar carbon monoxide levels. There was significant improvement as well in quality of life, energy and stamina levels, reduction of stress. And it seems that there was also no adverse effects while using this product. So, of course, I had to look up this product's website. I, again, am not recommending this product. This is just based off of my research, but I was like, I have to look up what are the first couple of ingredients in this product. And so the first one, a lot of it was, this is, I think, an Indian based company. And so the first product was I've never heard of it. The Latin name is Mucuna pruriens or Capikachu. So this herb is known to reduce nicotine craving and smoking urge, restores natural neurotransmitter balance, enhances energy and stamina. It also has ashwagandha in it, which we know a lot of it. It reduces stress, helps cardiovascular health. It even helps recover infertility and boost memory. And smoking cigarettes or nicotine vapes has a very negative effect on fertility. Just putting that there. The last active ingredient in this product is called Yashtimadu, or the Latin name is Glycyrrhiza glabra, and it restores lung function, helps in digestion, weight management, improves overall skin and oral health. So when you're trying to quit with nicotine, as I'm sure you know if you're in this boat, that not only are you trying to help restore your dopaminergic system, your limbic pathways, because nicotine has such a strong effect, unfortunately, on those pathways. But as I mentioned earlier, there's this aspect of the addiction that's an oral fixation, and it's this soothing thing of putting something to our lips and our mouth that goes across our lifetime as well as the lifetime of humankind, I think. But I know for me that it was really hard, like needing to just like put something to my lips and inhale and exhale. It had this calming effect for me. And so what I did personally that helped me a lot is there's this company called Monk, MONQ. I don't even know if I'm saying that. Then, all these products have got like such interesting names. But it is a company that does essential oils in a little vape pen. And so just having that, like, essential oils, they're organic, they're safe. It's a good I think it's a reputable company, but it's also been years since I've bought their product, or maybe like 2 years since I bought their products. But that having that action, and I'm doing it right now, of bringing something to my lips, inhale, exhale, that really, really helped me kick that desire to use something else. So I hope that helped. Again, I'm going to include the studies that I did in the show notes, because there's definitely a lot of other herbs that were mentioned, but for the sake of time, we're going to leave it at that. Last thing I'll say in reference to addiction and my field of expertise, acupuncture can be really amazing for overcoming addiction. There are literally points in the ear that are specifically for alcohol addiction. There are protocols that are used in rehab and detox centers to help aid with a natural detox in the body, as well as there's specific points in it to help with the psycho-spiritual, emotional aspect of addiction here. The only thing is you have to be committed and you have to be consistent. Okay. We're getting over time here, and I do have a couple of other questions, but I'm going to be able to only get into one more. And what I'll do is in the future, I will set up another Ask the Herbalist podcast, because hopefully you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. And yeah, we'll keep up the conversation. So the next question is herbs for fertility and help heal miscarriages, etc. So this can be a very huge subject. So I'm not going to be able to dive really deep into it. And because there's a lot of nuances as well, it's required to have a diagnosis. In terms of Chinese medicine here, I'm going to just stick with Chinese medicine to keep it simple. The typical diagnosis that are associated with struggles with fertility as well as habitual miscarriages would be either a spleen or a kidney channel issue. The spleen is responsible for holding things in the body, and the kidney channel is responsible for it holds our reservoirs of essence. And when we are creating life, we give a piece of our essence. It's that driving life force that creates more life force. So the focus here would really be on the kidneys and spleen as a general rule of thumb. So I had the pleasure of being trained under some people earlier this year who specialize in fertility. Specifically, I'm thinking of somebody who she's really incredible at herbs. So a lot of this is from school as well as from what she's taught me as well. And before I really get into it, again, just a reminder, I'm not trying to diagnose you, please, or tell you what to do. Please find an herbalist, find a Chinese medicine doctor, find a regular doctor, an OB, the list goes on. The first formula I want to talk about is called Bao Chun Wu Yao Feng. Again, gonna be in the show notes. What it means is worry-free formula to protect birth. I learned this during my my training with this person, and it is for pregnancy with a history of miscarriage due to kidney deficiency. I can't really get into what kidney deficiency is because of time, and if you want, let's get together and let's have a consultation. But it is a really popular formula in China to help with not only fertility, but also for keeping the baby safe and stable throughout the pregnancy. And what's really interesting is preparing the womb and the cervix for labor. So classical texts recommend this formula to take twice a day throughout the entire pregnancy at a lower dosage, about 3 grams. But as you get closer towards birth, you technically would up the dosage to, because if you look on American Dragon, which is the reference that I use for almost all my formulas that I have in the show notes, it talks about how it promotes labor, but it's all dependent on dosage. At a higher dosage, it is going to promote labor, but at a lower dosage, it helps hold the baby safely within the body. There's so many formulas to help with preventing miscarriage. There's also a formula called Taishan Pan Shi San, which translates to powder gives the stability of Mount Tai. And Mount Tai apparently is this really big mountain in China that's known for being stable. So as a pregnant woman, the lore here is you want to be as stable as a mountain. So it's for pregnant women. It augments the qi, nourishes blood, spleen qi, calms the fetus, and it's for threatened or habitual miscarriage due to qi and blood deficiency, specifically for the spleen. So indications would be, say, if a woman is vegetarian or vegan, or maybe their body's just having issues absorbing certain nutrients, then this is going to be a formula that will be very supportive. Say if a woman has some bleeding throughout her pregnancy, that is an indication, because the spleen's job again is to hold the blood in the vessels, then that would be an indication as well. There are other formulas that are specifically for threatened miscarriage, but I actually want to talk about a formula called Shenghua Tang, which is called Generation and Transformation Decoction, which actually, it invigorates the blood and dispels blood stasis. It warms the uterus as well as nourishes blood. So this would actually be something that would be really good for maybe if you're trying, again, not telling you what to do, not making a suggestion, but personally what I would do if I had a miscarriage, I would do it. I would prefer, if it were safe for me, to do it in the privacy of my own home. So I would probably use this formula towards the end to help my uterus recover, but also to just make sure that the last of it is being released. And it's also a really popular formula for postpartum, which any woman post-pregnancy, whether that pregnancy ends with a birth or ends with an abortion or a miscarriage, is in a state of postpartum. So this formula would be really supportive for anyone in that post-pregnancy phase. The last herb that I think would be very beneficial for prevention of miscarriage, and that I've been instructed to use while in clinic, is mugwort. But mugwort when it's in a form called moxibustion. So we can drink mugwort tea, but specifically when it's in a form where you burn it and you put it over a acupuncture point. When you put it over an acupuncture point called spleen 1, it's on the inside of your big toe. So on the inside of your big toe at the very bottom corner of the nail. This point helps with holding it when you use with moxa. So it actually helps with stopping bleeding. So say if at one point a couple months back my period was 7 days long, where it's usually I'm a 5-day kind of gal. And so I obviously was like, all right, that's enough. That's enough depletion for my system. Thank you very much. And so I did moxa at this point, and it stopped the bleeding. In terms of miscarriage and pregnancy, we would once again treat spleen 1 with moxibustion. And the purpose here would be the temptation is to say teach, but I think that the body has known it all along. So I guess to remind the body how to hold, whether that's to hold blood within the vessels, within the uterus, the womb, or to hold baby in the womb. In terms of fertility, you would run moxa along the spleen channel, which is basically from the big toe all the way up the inner thighs to the womb. You would also do it over the womb, just depending on where you are throughout your cycle. But there's a lot of nuances with that, and that would be something that you and I would have to go over, whether you're getting treatment from me in person or lifestyle counseling or an herbal consultation. Well, we nearly did it. Unfortunately, I do have a few more questions, but it's just not going to work for the sake of time. So thank you so much for sharing your question. I definitely will do another episode of this segment, maybe in a couple of months, and I will absolutely keep your question in the queue, and I'll be reaching out to you guys for more questions in the near future. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave your rating, your review, make sure you're subscribed, and to share with a friend. If you would like to work with me, whether that's in person or remotely, you can find my contact information in the show notes. Okay, my friend, thanks for making it this far with me. As always, sending you my love, and I will be feeling your energy next week.